this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is going to be a strange kitchen session because I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm winging it. Now, this is a bit of a favourite of quite a few people, Dendrobium senile. My daughter took one look at it and said, "What the hell has gone wrong with that?" And I said, well, slowly but surely it's not doing as well as it should. And this lovely new growth here, actually, I believe is broken. It actually fell on the floor and I think it landed on it. I believe that growth is actually broken. But we do have life. We have new growth here, another new growth here. There's another one there. So that's 3 in that area. Got one here and another one here. Now you have to bear in mind this isn't one plant. It was bought as one plant, but when I got it home it was several pieces. They all got mounted together. The strange thing is, this is the biggest piece over here. It's a little annoying when new growths come out halfway up the cane. They are effectively kikis. This is a very, very slow and poor rooter. So root loss on this is very difficult to recover from. If you get it growing, it grows really well, but if it loses its roots, it's very difficult to recover from. Now I've lost my records. I know I got it at Malvern, but I don't know which year. Now, well, I just don't know. I'd be guessing, but I got it at Malvern. Whereas in my records it says I got it off the internet. That must have been the one before that died. So we've got an unknown here as to how long it's been on here. But this moss is solid and compacted, and I believe is alive. But it wasn't live moss when it was put on there, it was zombie moss. Now I need to know what's going on underneath here. So that little spindly bit there is what's left of a root. So the velamen is completely gone, leaving that little thread. So I think the roots are well on their way out on here. So what I'm going to do is first of all get the fishing line off. If it wants to fall off this mount, I'll let it. If it wants to hang on there because it's got some attached roots, I'll let it. But I need to get the fishing line out the way to see what it wants to do. I don't normally give a plant a choice, but so I'm just looking for knots. Have I got any? No, because what I want to do is try and pull this through, 1 or 2 at a time, and hopefully they'll just pull through. Yes, that's what I was hoping would happen. So it'll just tug through, but if there was a knot on the end, then obviously not. The main reason I want this out of the way is because if this plant is not attached, then it will come off as part of the next thing I'm going to do, which you probably won't have seen on an orchid before. Right, so that's got it all off. This comes from bonsai. This allows you to tease and see what's going to happen. So if there are roots in here, I can sort of, the fork prongs will sort of go round them. What I'm after is trying to see what's going on. See now that root's got no tip on it, but it comes from the other side, so that's gone across the top. These are not live roots. Several of the canes, I tugged each one very, very gently, and 3 or 4 just came straight off in my hand. So they'd rotted off at the base. That's a sure sign there's something wrong in under this moss. And yeah, it smells of mushrooms. I think it's gone, and if it's been on here some time, and the moss has gone, it will have taken a lot of the roots with it, which is not good, but it may have even started the bark rotting. I haven't seen a live root yet. Yes, I have. There's one there. One is not good. I think it's going to have to come off and start again, which is a pain. Just going to ease it off gently. Let's see if we find any actual roots in under here. This is not stuff out the way. This is compacted zombie moss. I think we might have to give this a run under the tap. And this is bark. Now, I wonder if that was stuck to it when I got it home, and because there was some roots stuck to it I left it there. But you can see here we've got no viable roots on this piece of plant whatsoever. But where I was saying it's a nuisance when you get shoots halfway up the cane because they're kikis, they will produce roots, but they've got to have something to get into, but we do have one at the base. So this is a viable piece, even though it hasn't got viable roots. So hopefully this will recover. Now we've got to look at this. These canes are firm, there's nothing wrong with them, so they stay. So we have one piece there with 3 new growths. This is broken, so that's coming off, or it's separated, let's put it that way. Is this all one piece now? Or has it rotted near the base and become more pieces? I'll leave it as one. So that's one. That's this piece here. What have we got here? It's not really a viable piece. No viable roots and one cane and no leaves. See, if you look at this piece has got no leaves, but it's about to get some. So that'll help start getting some food back in there. Now we're getting on to what were small pieces when they were planted. Let's see if we've got any roots here. At least this piece has got some leaves. And we do have a fern, which we don't want. But we don't have viable roots. I'm being very gentle here, but I want this old moss off. That's a must. A lot of it will probably just ease off under the tap. See, again, large piece of bark. I wonder if that was on it, or whether it's actually... No, look, the bark's gone. It's pulling the surface off the bark. Right, that's a lot of what the problem is then. The cork bark's gone. That's unusual, but when you've had a mount a really, really long time, and the moss compacts, it does actually stay wet enough to actually start to rot. It's very rare, but it does mean I'm going to have to try and get these pieces off. They should just disintegrate, as we haven't really got many live roots. Well, we haven't got any. I'm hoping that some live moss around this might actually pull it back. These roots are not good. But anyway, this piece has got a couple of leaves on a poor cane and a new growth. So new growth and some leaves. Now this is going to be one piece here. Now is that cane really actually broken? I don't think it is. It's just very thin at the base. Because that happened so long ago. If that cane was broken, I'd have thought that would have died by now, quite honestly. Well, it's not happy, but it's got a new growth next to it. Again, look, the surface of the cork bark has separated. So the roots that are attached to rubbish, basically, rotting bark and old moss. Not a good combination, really. The trouble is when you start getting compacted moss like this around the base of a plant, it's going to start rot, especially in the winter time when the temps are low. Right, well those two little canes are actually firm, so I'll leave them. And if this is still okay, then it has actually got some. So I've got little white bits on this cane. I'm wondering whether that's scale. I think it is. Anyway, we've got a new growth on that piece and some very weak flippy floppy leaves, so not good. But you can see this is gone. Look, you can just peel it off. Just disintegrated. Right. So therein lies most of the problem, is the bark's gone. And that's the least obvious, because obviously the bark that sticks out is fine. There's no problem with this. It's the bark in under that compacted moss. Now this bit doesn't seem to want to let go. The others came off quite easily. I'm going to go back to using that fork again and just ease it off. Rather than my great big clumsy fingers in under the plant. Whoop! Oh, I've got it. Right, now what have we got here then? Well, we've got a small cane with some leaves, another cane with a leaf. That's no good. Nor was that. These look like growths that started and failed. Should have spotted this earlier, really. Right. So we've got some very poor little pieces. Again, new growth. New growth equals new roots. New roots should get the plant to recover, providing it can last long enough. See, this root would be really good. It would be the only good root we've got. But if you look at the base of it, it's gone. It's the first root I've had to cut. Yeah, the velamon's completely gone on that. Right, so now what we've got to do now is get this back onto a single mount. I'm not splitting it. I'm going to try and keep it all together. So I'll get rid of all the junk, give these a run under the tap, and I think the fact that we've got signs of some rot, I'll go over it with the hydrogen peroxide as well, sort of give it a clean up. That is two pieces, isn't it? Yeah, I thought it was. Is it worth planting that? No new growths. Oh yeah, there is a new growth. Right, it's worth planting then. So tiny little piece. Tiny little piece. Both of those have got a new growth. This one's got some leaves and a new growth. And then this one is the one that it's got a very dodgy cane. It doesn't seem to be attached very well, but a new growth and a couple of flimsy leaves. And then this piece is all new growth. That's got 3 new growths on it, but no leaves. And some canes that look as though they've had it. But I think when I get the moss off the base here, they could shoot out. There's still life in them, in as much as they haven't gone. There's still green there. But I think the old moss hasn't been doing them any good. Right, we will have a clean up and I'll be back. That's not as bad as I thought, but if that had been done like last year in April, we wouldn't be in this problem. It's been allowed to go too far. This is rotten. It's turning back to like soil and old moss. See, a lot of the roots went down in that crease, and that's just turning back to like, it's almost like peat. But it's gone, so we won't be reusing that mount. That's for sure. Right, I'll be back. Okay, the fact that we're dealing with a slow rooter, obviously wherever you put this plant needs to be able to stay there for some time. There are some that recommend it grows better in a pot than it does mounted, and there are some that say it does better mounted. Well, you take your chance. But what I've just done is I've just gone on the internet, tried to find as many pictures as possible of this growing in the wild. There aren't many. be lucky to find half a dozen. There's lots that look like they're growing in the wild, they're just on a mount, hanging in amongst other plants to make it look like the jungle. They're not really growing wild. But out of those that are clearly growing in the wild, there's quite a few that are on virtually bare bark. Some have got a bit of moss around them, but they're not growing in luxurious mossy type places like some orchids do. And I think a lot of that will be to do with them being slow rooted and not deep rooting. So they don't want too much. They want to be able to get hold of some wood quickly and stay there. So I'm using a new piece of cork bark that's not been used before. I reuse my mounts. Plants come off for various reasons. Like they've got too big. That's the best one. But it's a brand new piece. It's rock hard. It should last a very long time, which means once this plant's on here, it can stay there for as long as it needs. Now, I've been a bit silly. If I'd waited, to coin a phrase from a certain part of our country, you should have waited. Well, I didn't, because I've just ordered some more, because this stuff is rubbish for using on mounts. It's far too thin. Now that's £10 breaking strain. It's about, well, 4.5 kilograms basically. But basically the stuff I've ordered to replace this is 25, so that's 2.5 times as thick. That makes a bit more sense to me, because this is so flimsy and fiddly. It won't break, it's just so difficult to work with. But for once, now normally I put my plant on and then put some live moss around it. That's not practical in this case, because I've got a lot of pieces to put on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got 5 pieces here to get on. Without all falling off and without the moss falling off. So this time, probably the only time you'll see me do it, and it's a lot because I'm working with a plant with no roots, no live roots. The moss is going on first, and it's going to be a thin layer. Again, trying to replicate what might be going on in the wild from the very few pictures I've managed to find. So moss on first this time round. So I'm going to have a nice mossy trunk, but it's far from what I would call heavy on the moss. This is just a light coating of moss, and I'm making sure that the moss I use is the green stuff, not the browny stuff that's underneath. I want this to be proper live moss. One, because it will flipping well look a lot better. And two, it'll look a lot better. I thought that was important, so I've said it twice. I mean, this is not only one of my favourite plants, it's also quite a favourite on the channel, and has been for some considerable time. It's not going to bloom this year. It's in too poor a state. Had nice blooms last year, but it's gone downhill since then. So we've got to bring it back. I don't give up on dendrobiums. The fact it's a little sad that it's gone this far, but of all the plants I've got, they're one of the easiest to recover. But out of the dendrobiums, this isn't an easy one, because it grows its roots so slowly. Right, we've got a reasonable covering there. I'm going to get a bit up there, because I still haven't placed these plants. I still don't know where they're actually going to go. Right, so we've got a nice covering, yeah, but it's a very thin layer. There's gaps, there's little gaps in it. It's not a solid mass. Right, there's my towel. Dry hands, since I'm getting anywhere near fishing line. Now the idea now is to look at where the new growths are. Let me show you one. Which one is it? This one. This little new growth has grown some roots. Now they've failed, but they are new, which means these new growths are going to produce their roots quite soon. That is good news. Right, so this one has got 2 effective kikis and a new growth there, and quite an assortment of, you know, roots that will do a bit of hydration, but they're not active, they're not growing, and that's quite a big piece. So if I place that there, say, let's push this one up near the top. It would be nice if those two, well, let's get them placed. And what I might do with these two canes with the kikis on is put like that and pull them down as close to the mount as possible, so that even though they're kikis, when they root, the roots can get into something. Yeah, that's my theory. Now I don't want to knock new growths as I'm doing this, but these are going to get placed quite close together. To say there's what have we got here? Did we have a new growth on there? Yeah, the new growth on there is round the back, so that will root okay. Sort of about there, I think. That'll come out sort of there and come up in that bit where that older part is a bit dead. Well, a bit dead is a lot dead, really. I'm not sure that is. No, that's actually detached. Right, so we've got another new growth there. We'll have that one down the bottom, slightly pointing downwards, that one. And then this one is the tiniest of new growths, but there's two of them. Yeah, there's actually two tiny little new growths there and a root hanging off. And we'll put that one there. Right, so that's got them positioned. I'm reasonably happy with where they are. New growths have got places to be, places to grow into. And it sort of looks like one plant. I mean, I'm not trying to disguise it as a single plant. That's certainly not my intention. Now, the hard bit, because I'm going to have to wind this round without knocking either the plant off or the moss off. And it might have been an idea to put this on first, but we'll manage without. As I said, the difficulty here is the thinness of this stuff. If I'd just waited a few days, my new stuff would have arrived and we'd have been working with something that's not virtually invisible. Once you start using this, it's so thin it disappears. You can't see where you've been. Therefore, it's difficult to work out where you're going if you don't know where you've been. Right, so I'm going to start at the bottom simply because it's easiest. That's not a recommendation. This is so thin and so fine. Ugh. We could have some language here trying to work with this blinking stuff. I'm trying to get the bottom two pieces in the first loop like that. Right, that's got you. Now I've got to find me tugging end. Try and pull that tight. Right. The one good thing about the really thin stuff, you can go around many times, it doesn't spoil the look. Now I'm just going to wind now. I'm not cutting a piece off, I'll just let this thing unwind itself as I go. But I don't want to trap leaves, I want to go under that leaf, not over it. And go around there. That's one. And I'll come around, the leaf's going to be annoying because it's going to be there every turn until I get higher up. Right, so then we start coming up against the other plants, a bit higher up now. Try and go inside that one and inside that one. I'm just trying to not to garrot any growths. Certainly the new ones have got to be avoided at all costs. Let me get to there, and this is the bit where I want to pull the canes down quite tight so that if those kikis do actually root, they will actually root into the moss and the bark. At at least that bit's working. It's unwinding itself as I go. Come on. You under that leaf? Yes. Right, so that's the two that I want pulled down. Right, now I'm just going to hold that and just check the plants. Make sure they're at least held. Yeah, sort of. Right, I'm going to come round a few more times. We'll go under that one because it sticks out. I want these reasonably tight so that they pull into the moss at all possible. Do you know, I'm going to cut that leaf off in a minute. It gets in my way many more times. Right, I just need another couple of turns on these lower two plants because they only had one turn each. So I think that should do them. I'll check again. Are they? Yeah, they're tight now. Right, so we can cut that off. It's so thin, I've got a job to even see it to cut it. And then we'll gently put that on its back because we've got new growth sticking out. Just while I tie off. Let's find my end. This is the bit where it gets fiddly, trying to thread things through. So I need that to go through that V to give me something to pull on. Oh, it's just so fiddly. If I push it through like that, and then I'll have to try and, it's sticking to my fingers. I just cannot get that to, I'm going to try and grab it with the scissors. Better still, grab it with the flipping pliers. That's got it. That's what I wanted. I wanted that to give me something to tie against. Otherwise, if it's hanging in the air, it does just that. It just is so flimsy. Right, what are we doing? Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. A lot of these exposed roots, hopefully the moss will start growing up through those gaps. Doesn't look very elegant in the centre here at the moment, but don't forget we've got new growths coming. There's another one down in there. Yeah, so that's it. That's how it's going to be. But we'll just have to hope that it does okay. Now, as I've actually got a label, I think I will actually attach it. Ought to do a new one really, but there's nothing wrong with that one. I can read it. That's when I had a felt tip pen that actually stayed when you wrote instead of fading. The ones I seem to get now, I don't reckon they're genuine. I reckon they're cheap Chinese copies, not the real thing. And because they flood the market, unless you go direct to the supplier that makes them, wherever they're made, not in China, then you don't get the genuine article nowadays. You know, you can buy it from a reputable seller, but if the market's flooded with copies, how do they know they've got the genuine article? And they're always reluctant to go to the genuine manufacturer because they have to pay more. And then theirs cost a lot more than everybody else's, so they don't sell any. Vicious circle, this cheap copy stuff. It's our own fault. We want cheap, then we will get, well, in the main, rubbish. And that will flood the market, and the original suppliers will often go out of business because they can't sell their stuff at that price because there are cheaper versions around. So there we go, that's Mr. Hairy remounted, and hopefully we will now get some roots, because if we don't get any roots it's not going to last long, quite honestly. Now this one is a weird one because it's all, you get the impression from places that it's a cooler grower. It's not. It's actually it's very temperature tolerant, but the bit that it does seem to need more than anything is that dry spell, and that dry spell is slightly forward. This comes from Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, that type of region. It's probably tucked away in quite a few places in that region that still haven't, they still haven't been found. But in that region, and basically it has a dry spell or drier spell at the end of winter into spring. So whereas, like, in the UK we think of winter as start of November to the end of February into March. No. Where this is, it carries on growing in November, starts to slow down December time, and the dry period is more like mid-January to mid-March. It's pushed out a little bit. So it's one of those, you've got to watch the growth. And if you get to November and you've still got growths pushing on and roots pushing out, then don't stop watering it. Reduce it down a bit, because you're going to get your shorter days. I'm on UK now. If you get shorter days and lower temperatures, then it will slow down, in which case reduce your watering and get your feed slowed down as well, and then it will have a drier period. And even though it can dry out during that period, it shouldn't dry out when it's growing, but once it gets to mature and the growths have matured and the growth seems to have slowed down almost to a standstill, it's not going to use the food if you give it, and it can do more harm than good. And then effectively it's not a late winter, early spring bloomer, it's a late spring, early summer bloomer. So again, it's to do with that drier wintry period that we call it. It's not really a winter at all, it's just a drier spell. And it's a bit later than we think of in our heads. And then it's not until after that that it'll think about blooming. Hence late spring, into summer bloomer. So we'll give that a go then and see if it'll pull on now. It certainly can't do any worse, can it? I mean, it was going downhill. You could see the wood was rotten. That's unusual for corkback bark. It's just a very old piece. And it was taking the roots down. But luckily, it's bursting back into life. We've got new growths pushing out in many places. There's even some tucked in behind. So I think it will pull on now, because I know the new roots are not long behind those growths, because one of them, the more mature one, whichever one it was, had signs of those new roots coming. So there we go, we get that back. And these don't need bright light in the growing season. They don't need bright light at all. They need their bright light in that drier spell. Yeah? And that's because some of the trees in those forests are deciduous, so it brightens up a bit during that period. Not all of them. It doesn't come from deciduous forests, it comes from mixed forests. In the main, but it's quite variable where it comes from. Different elevations, different light levels, different temperature ranges. So in theory it sounds quite tolerant, doesn't it? Till you try growing it. It's probably my most awkward dendrobium to keep going. It seems to have lovely spurts where it appears to be doing incredibly well, and then it just keels over. Well, let's hope we can keep this one going. See you next time.